Character builds are a lot of fun. They're a great way to express your creativity, conceptualize some different ideas, and mostly just see how hard you can kind of kill some stuff in your favorite games. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably know that builds and optimization aren't really my thing until today. The build part, not the optimization part. In fact, on that, I want to shout out Chris from Traded Monk's Temple and Nathan from D&D Unoptimized for helping me figure out a few key elements of this build that actually make it work, and it was actually so important to Chris that I stressed just how not optimal this whole thing is. So let me be clear, this build is not optimal. It might not even be good, but damn, when I tell you that it is amazing, you best believe me. So if you enjoy creating insane builds that technically work almost as much as you enjoy playing them, then you're in the right place. This is also exactly the type of build that I would play in a one-shot or something like that. Firstly, the concept. Let's talk about this build, but I don't want to spoil too much of it just yet. In my head, this whole build was a representation of he spent so much time trying to figure out if he could that he never stopped to think if he should. This thing heavily relies on consistently critting and taking advantage of an unorthodox combination of features that we will take throughout our leveling up. Secondly, we are going to multiclass. Oh boy, are we going to multiclass. 6 times in fact. So if you've ever wanted to play half the classes in the game at the same time, then this one's also for you. Finally, yes, this build takes an absurdly long time to actually come online and quote unquote work, but hey, I think that's all part of its charm. If you're gonna use it, it's probably gonna have to be in a high level one shot. Alright, so let's get started, and where better than with our ability scores. I'm currently on a quest to hit 10,000 subscribers by the time the revised 2024 D&D books release in September. So if you like what I do and you want to help me reach that goal, a sub to the channel would mean a lot. Shout out to all my members as usual, Julian in the Champion tier, Jackal3, Jumpy Sonic Bear in the Hero tier, and Julio, Siren XY, and Brain Laborks in the Warrior tier. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. So if you'd like to help support me for as little as $1 per month, click the join button to get access to early videos, priority replies, and just so much more. Thank you. We'll be using the standard array, so we're going to drop a 15 in strength, 14 in dexterity, 13 in intelligence, 12 in charisma, 10 in constitution, and then we're actually going to be dumping wisdom with an 8. But that's okay, it's not like there's many spell effects that rely on wisdom anyway, right? Next up is our race. We're going to be choosing the Goblin from Monsters of the Multiverse for Fury of the Small and the flexible ability scores. We'll be putting a +2 into strength and the +1 in charisma. This will be important later, I promise. With all that out of the way, let's start building. We're going to be taking our first level in Fighter. We want all that usual good stuff that we get from taking a level in Fighter. You know, like proficiency in Constitution saves, 2-weapon fighting style, second wind, and I guess Action Surge is alright too. We're also going to be taking a few levels in Fighter because they have slightly quicker access to a second feat choice, which, as you'll see, is going to be really important. So at second level, we'll be sticking with Fighter, mainly because we want to get to Fighter 3, because we're going to be taking everyone's favorite subclass, Champion. Why? Because we want improved critical. Critting on a 19 or 20 instantly doubles our odds at scoring a critical hit, and this will prove to be crucial to this build. At 4th level, we are still sticking with Fighter, and we'll get our first ASI/feat choice. Here's where you'll start to get a glimpse of where this is heading, and if you've been on my Discord in the last few weeks, you might have already figured it out. And if you haven't, why not? Check out my Discord, the link's in the description. We are not going to be taking an ASI here. In fact, we aren't going to be taking any ASIs during this entire build. For our first feat, we're going to be picking up, obviously, Sentinel. No, I'm just kidding, we aren't. Remember when I said that this build wasn't even close to optimal? Yeah, we're going to be picking up the Slasher feat. Introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you've probably never read this feat. Slasher allows us to increase our strength or dex scores by 1. It allows us, when we hit a creature with an attack that deals slashing damage, to reduce their speed by 10 feet until the start of our next turn. And if it's a critical hit, the creature gets disadvantage on its attack rolls until the start of our next turn. This is a nice little debuff to throw on to benefit our party. Now we'll be putting that +1 into our strength score to bring it up to 18 to get that juicy +4 modifier. At 5th level, we are sticking with Fighter because, well, extra attack. There's not anything else to it. Now at 6th level, here's where things start to get interesting because we are going to take another level in Fighter. Like I said earlier, they get quicker access to ASI/feats, so we will finally be able to reap this benefit here. At 6th level, we're going to be taking another feat, and this time we are going to not be taking Sentinel again, and instead we're going to take the Crusher feat. Much like Slasher, Crusher lets us add a +1 to either our Constitution or our Strength scores. It also allows us on a hit that deals bludgeoning damage to move a creature 5 feet to an unoccupied space, provided it's not more than 1 size larger than us. And when we crit with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, attacks against that creature have advantage until the start of our next turn. Another nice buff for our party. Now I know what you're thinking, you took Slasher before and now you're taking Crusher, I don't get it. We'll get there. We're going to add our +1 from the Crusher feat onto our Strength to bring that up to a 19. At this point, Colby would do his normal damage report, but we aren't going to bother with that since we're going to be doing like 13 damage. So instead, let's take a look at our insanity report. So far, it's not too insane, but just a bit questionable. We've got 6 levels in Fighter, 2 feats that basically no one picks and proc on different damage types, some odd ability score distributions, and no clear path to anything functional. But don't worry, it's about to get a little bit more ridiculous. At 7th level, we are finally going to take our first multi-class dip, and obviously we are going to be heading straight to Warlock. Since we picked Goblin for our race, we were able to use that flexible +1 to bring our 12 charisma score up to a 13 to allow us to make this happen. For our patron, we're going to be choosing the Genie, and if you've been paying attention, there is a chance that you figured out the next step here. For our Genie kind, we are going to be selecting the Dao for the sole reason that the Genie's Wrath feature allows us, once per turn, on a hit with an attack roll, to deal extra damage equal to our proficiency bonus, with the damage type being determined by the type of Genie. Conveniently, the Dao allows us to add bludgeoning damage. I bet that Crusher feat doesn't look so dumb now after all, does it? So now, on a hit with our weapon, let's say a slashing weapon, a scimitar for example, we can simultaneously deal both slashing and bludgeoning damage, allowing us to proc both slasher and crusher simultaneously. But believe me when I say we are not done yet. At 8th level, we are immediately going to swerve out of Warlock because who needs that spooky stuff anyway, am I right? And dip into, you guessed it, say it with me, Wizard. Our conveniently placed 13 in our intelligence score lets this work quite nicely. Obviously, the best reason to take levels in Wizard is for that sweet 1d6 hit dice, but I promise our reason is even more impressive than that. We get access to spellcasting and arcane recovery, sure, whatever. We aren't going to be casting that many spells, which makes our next level even more confusing because at 9th level, we are taking another level in Wizard. This gives us access to our arcane tradition, and this is where things start to come together. We're going to be taking the Order of Scribe subclass for one very specific reason, which I will explain in way too much detail very shortly. At 10th level, we're going to take another level in Wizard, our 3rd in the class, but at 11th, we will be taking our 4th level in Wizard, which gives us yet another feat. And hopefully, if you've been playing along, you figured out that there is only one choice of feat for us here. It's time. We need to take Piercer. Piercer, once again, lets us raise our dexterity or strength scores by 1. It also allows us once per turn on a hit with a weapon that deals piercing damage to re-roll the damage dice and use the new roll. We can only do that once though. And additionally, when you score a critical hit with a weapon that deals piercing damage, you can roll 1 additional damage die. Now I know what you're probably thinking at this point. It's finally time to get that strength score up to a +5, which we will do. Oh yeah, there's probably one other thing that's crossed your mind. We've taken Slasher and Crusher and explained how they can simultaneously deal both slashing and bludgeoning damage with a single attack, but Jeremy, I can hear you say, how does Piercer fit in? Surely you can't deal slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing damage all at the same time, can you? Can you? Let's finally explore the majesty of this build. At 12th level, we take our 5th level in Wizard solely for the reason that we need access to 3rd level spells. So remember when we took Order of Scribes? That's all gonna make sense now. Order of Scribes wizards at 2nd level get access to their Awakened Spellbook feature. It does some neat things that creates quite a few wonky interactions, and this is certainly no exception. I will be clear right up front that this interaction very technically works, and would ultimately be up to the DM to allow it or not. I've asked a few people about it, and even Chris agreed that it is super questionable and very much up to the DM, but if super questionable ideas aren't right in my wheelhouse, I don't even know what is. Regardless, there is an alternative as well, which I will explain after. So with the Awakened Spellbook, we get access to one very specific ability, which I will quote directly. When you cast a wizard spell with a spell slot, you can temporarily replace its damage type with a type that appears in another spell in your spellbook, which magically alters the spell's formula for this casting only. The latter spell must be of the same level as the spell slot that you expend. So what this means is that when we cast a spell from our spellbook, we can replace its damage type with the damage type of another spell in our spellbook, provided that they are of the same level or cast at the same level. This is how we make this combo happen. This is how we're going to add piercing damage. The first spell that we add to our spellbook is Spirit Shroud. It's a classic and it's really good, but most importantly, it isn't dealing damage of its own, but rather it's simply attached to our weapon attack, which means it does qualify for critical hits and is exactly what we're looking for. The next spell we pick is Summon Fae. You'll notice that Summon Fae doesn't actually deal any damage all of its own either. However, you'll also notice that in the creature stat block for the Summon Fae, its short sword attack deals piercing damage. So we then swap the piercing damage from Summon Fae and apply it to our Spirit Shroud instead of Radiant or whatever, and now on exactly one hit per round, we can deal all three of slashing through our Scimitar, bludgeoning through our Genie's Wrath feature, and piercing through our Awakened spellbook, and thus apply all of Slasher, Crusher, and Piercer all in a single hit. Ergo, the Slurper. This only works once per turn since Genie's Wrath is limited, but if this isn't the combo of all time. So like I said, whether or not you count the piercing damage in the stat block to count as being in the spell as per the Awakened spellbook text is super subjective and will be up to the DM. If a player came up to me to ask this for the point of pulling off this insanity during a one-shot, I would 100% allow it, but your mileage may vary. It's also worth mentioning that you can still pull off this exact same combo without third level spells by upcasting Ice Knife and then using the piercing damage from Cloud of Daggers. This technically works better rules as written, but the Spirit Shroud version is way more fun in my opinion, so we're gonna go with that. At 13th level, we multiclass again, this time dipping into, you guessed it, Barbarian. Why? Because Rage. That's a lie. We won't actually ever be raging since you can't cast or maintain concentration on spells while raging, so that's a no-go. Instead, we'll actually be taking a 2nd level in Barbarian for our 14th level so we can get access to Reckless Attack. As a reminder, we are also champion fighters, so we get to crit on a 19 or a 20 and are obviously going to be using Reckless Attack on every single attack without exception. So our crit chances are getting better already. It only took 14 levels. Anyway, at 15th level, we are going to naturally take a dip into Paladin because who needs more subclasses anyway? We've already got 3. We're obviously going to be taking 2 levels in Paladin to get access to Divine Smite, bringing us to 16th level in total. We'll also be picking up Blind Fighting as our second fighting style because why not? Finally, from 17th through 20th level, we are going to dip into our 6th class, the Rogue. We need to hit at least 4 levels in another subclass to pick up one last feat, and Rogue seemed like a reasonable choice since we get access to Sneak Attack, which also benefits from critical hits, conveniently enough. At 19th level, we will pick up our 4th subclass, the Assassin. We don't need the advantage on creatures since we are going to be using Reckless Attack at every possible opportunity, but in the off chance that we happen to benefit from surprising some enemies, we get to go off. Finally, at 20th level, we get our final feat, and while we could pick up, say, Tough to actually have some hit points, we obviously aren't going to be doing that. 111 is clearly more than enough. Instead, we are going to take the Strike of the Giants Fire Strike so we can add an extra 1d10 fire damage to our attacks, which also conveniently enough counts for crits. So the final build is Fighter 6, Warlock 1, Wizard 5, Barbarian 2, Paladin 2, Rogue 4, with Slasher, Crusher, Piercer, and Strike of the Giants. What a ride. Now, what does this thing actually look like in combat? What's the setup? How does it play? Amazingly, there actually isn't much of a setup. We can pretty much do everything this build has to offer on its first turn, with the exception of our offhand attack with our second Scimitar. So on our turn, we're going to use our bonus action to cast Spirit Shroud, replacing the damage type with Piercing that we got from Summon Fae. Then we attack, and on our first hit, we use our Genie's Wrath ability to add bludgeoning damage also to the hit. This allows us to activate all 3 of Slasher, Crusher, and Piercer. Meaning, on a single hit, we can deal damage, reduce their speed by 10 feet, push the creature away by 5 feet, and potentially reroll a damage die. And if we happen to crit, we can also give it disadvantage on all attack rolls until the start of our next turn, give advantage to us and our party on attack rolls against it until the start of our next turn, and roll 1 additional damage die. Can all of these things be accomplished in far less convoluted and much easier ways that don't take 20 levels to achieve? Absolutely, but where is the fun in that? Let's talk numbers. You might be asking now what the odds of critting actually are, and I'm as surprised as you are that they actually are pretty good. On any given attack, we have a 10% chance to crit as a baseline because we took Champion Fighter, so we crit on a 19 or 20. But with Reckless Attack, we are essentially always rolling our attacks with advantage. This immediately nearly doubles our chances to 19. We are attacking a lot, ideally 3 times per turn. Once with our main attack, once with our offhand since we're wielding 2 scimitars, and then a third with our extra attack. This means that provided we attack 3 times, we are rolling up to 60 20s per turn, which gives us a 48% chance to crit at least once per turn, and if we use Action Surge, we can take our crit chance up to a whopping 65% over the course of a single turn. Since we can only do that once per short rest though, we will still be attacking at least 3 times per turn, but even there, we have nearly an 11% chance at critting twice, which really isn't all that bad. So what does this actually translate into damage-wise? I'm going to calculate maximum damage because obviously we're going to be rolling perfectly every time, but actually I'll include average damage as well. Maximum damage output on this build ranges from 289 with no crits all the way up to 597, assuming you crit on all 5 attacks and you're attacking a fiend to benefit from the extra smite damage to fiends and undead. Meaning with this, you could easily kill Zariel provided your scimitars are magical, or you could be 9 damage short of 1 turn killing an ancient red dragon. It ends up being short since the dragon is immune to the fire damage from Giant Strike. This was also all calculated assuming mundane weapons. But just don't think too hard about all that necessary critting, it's fine, it'll be fine. If we take a look at average damage instead, we're still looking at over 200. This was calculated against a creature with an AC of 19, with the probabilities of critting included in the calculation as well. Is this good? No, it's obviously not. It is so far from being optimal, but the fact that it's even technically possible and is still hitting for an average DPR that exceeds 100 without Action Surge is genuinely more than I expected it to be able to pull off. Yes, you're burning through smites at an alarming rate, but that's all part of the fun. So that's the Slurper build, a disgusting name for a disgusting build. Again, this was really more about whether we could make this work rather than whether we should make this work. It's obviously not optimal, it's got basically no staying power, but when you get to go off, it's gonna be a lot of fun, if for no other reason than the insane novelty of the character, and if that's not the point of a one-shot, I don't even know what is. Anyway, your move, Colby. In all seriousness though, this build was actually incredibly fun to conceptualize and create, and I'm now starting to get a better understanding of why people enjoy this element of the game so much. I'd love to make some more insane builds in the future. I've already got a couple of ideas, so let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this very different type of video from me and if there's any other ridiculous ideas that you'd like to see.